At my husband's funeral, I sat alone. Not a single child showed up. They chose parties over their own father's funeral. But the next morning, before I tell you what happened next, if you're watching this, please hit subscribe to her voice. Tell me in the comments which part shocked you the most. The chapel smelled faintly of lilies and polished wood, the kind of scent that makes your throat tighten for reasons you can't explain. It was cold that day, the kind of cold that seeps through black fabric and into your bones. Only one service program sat on the front. Phew, mine. I watched the sunlight fall across the coffin, a narrow beam touching the brass handle like a final blessing. No footsteps echoed behind me. No whispers, no rustle of dresses or suits. Just silence, thick enough to feel. When the pastor asked if we should wait for family, I shook my head. "Start," I said. His time mattered. Even now, the words floated up and disappeared somewhere above the rafters. The pastor began reading scripture, voice soft, almost apologetic. Outside, wind moved through the bare trees. Somewhere, a door creaked, and I wondered if it was him, just passing by one last time. I didn't cry, not yet. I had done that already, in the quiet hours between hospice visits and medication schedules. This was something else, a hollow space too deep for tears. After the last prayer, the coffin was lowered. I stood, hands trembling slightly, and whispered his name, Henry. The soil hit the wood softly, like rain, and then it was done. No children, no grandchildren, just me and the man who once filled every room with laughter and the smell of coffee at 6 a.m. I waited by the graveside until the workers packed up. One of them, a young man with kind eyes, offered to walk me to my car. I thanked him, but I wanted to walk alone. The gravel crunched under my heels. The sky was turning gray. When I reached home, the house looked almost offended by the silence. Henry's jacket still hung by the door, his reading glasses folded neatly on the side table. I poured myself tea, but forgot to drink it. It just sat there, cooling, like everything else in my life. Walked into the living room and saw his chair. That old leather recliner he refused to replace, the cushion still, carried the faint dip of his weight. I sat across from it and waited for the familiar sound of his laugh. Nothing came. Instead, the clock on the wall ticked louder than it ever had. Tick, tick, tick. Every second felt like a reminder of who didn't show up. David, our eldest, had texted that morning. "Mom, can't make it. Deadlines stacked. Love you. Love you." Two hollow words that didn't sound like love at all. And Emily, our daughter, she hadn't even bothered with a message. But her Instagram told the truth. Pictures of cocktails and friends in Miami. Smiles too wide. Caption: "Finally. A break I deserve." I stared at the phone until my eyes blurred. Then I turned it face down and let the silence fill me. That night, I sat in the dim kitchen, one lamp casting a soft yellow pool of light over the table. Henry's chair faced me, empty. That's when I spoke, not out loud, but inside. In the place where we used to meet, halfway between thought and memory. "I won't let them forget you," I said softly. My voice didn't shake. It was steady. "I promise you, Henry. Tomorrow, I'll make sure they remember exactly what they chose to forget." The promise lingered in the air, a quiet kind of vow, not born of anger, but of love and justice. Outside, the night deepened. Rain began tapping gently against the windows, like fingertips, and for the first time since the funeral, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't peace. Not yet. It was purpose. Tomorrow would come, and with it, the beginning of something they'd never expect. I turned off the light, walked down the hall, and stopped at the study door. Henry's handwriting still covered the notes on his desk. Numbers, account names, passwords, the small things that keep a life running, and one folder, half hidden beneath a pile of unpaid bills, caught my eye. It was labeled Family Trust. I placed my hand over it and whispered again, "Tomorrow." Then I went to bed, But sleep didn't come. Only the sound of rain, steady and certain, like it too was waiting for morning. Morning came pale and quiet, soft as if the world itself was hesitant to wake. I didn't rush. I dressed slowly, pulling on a gray sweater Henry had once liked, the one he said made me look calm. My reflection in the hallway mirror felt unfamiliar, hollow, but steadier somehow. The city outside was just beginning to stir. Charleston's streets were empty, the harbor fog lingering in the air, curling around the oaks and spilling onto the sidewalks. I walked carefully, as if each step on the gravel of our driveway measured the weight of the last 25 years. In the study, the family trust folder rested on the desk, a silent invitation. I ran my fingers along its edges, remembering Henry's neat handwriting, the careful annotations, the years of quiet planning that now rested entirely in my hands. David would have scoffed at the paperwork. Emily would have waved it off, distracted by brunch plans or scrolling feeds. But today they didn't get a say. Henry's legacy, his careful, patient life, would be remembered, the way it should be. I opened the folder, letting the sunlight from the window catch on the thick paper, and started reading. Account numbers, property deeds, retirement plans, meticulously organized. My hands trembled, but not from fear, from resolve. Henry had left me a key to everything, a way to ensure that love and care, not neglect, would dictate the final chapters of our story. I made my first decision quietly, deliberately. The lake cabin, where we had spent so many summer nights talking about the stars, would stay untouched. The house on Willow Street, where Emily and David had grown up, would remain theirs, but only after a small adjustment. A reminder, a lesson, not a punishment. I scribbled notes in the margins, careful, neat, precise. Each mark a whisper of intention. I would not shout, would not scold. They would feel it in the absence, the subtle shift of what they assumed was guaranteed. By late morning, I was ready. The meeting with Mr. Reeves, our family lawyer, was brief but decisive. His eyes softened when he saw me, the weight of recent days pressing into his expression. "Maggie," he said, "I've reviewed the notes Henry left." "He trusted you to make these choices, didn't he?" I nodded. "Yes, and I intend to honor that trust." He leaned back, hands folded, hesitant for the words he might offer. I didn't need comfort. I needed clarity, the quiet certainty of final decisions. We worked through the list. Some accounts would go untouched, sacred. Others would be redirected, to create pauses, to teach, to remind David and Emily that absence has consequences, that choices matter. I didn't feel joy, nor anger, just the calm weight of responsibility. When the meeting ended, the folder closed with a soft snap. Mr. Reeves gave me a small, respectful nod. "Everything will be in order by Friday," he said. Outside, the sun had climbed higher, brushing against the pastel buildings of Charleston. I walked slowly down Broad Street, passing the cafe Henry had stopped at each morning. The aroma of roasted coffee beans floated in the air, grounding me, pulling memories of him forward in small, sharp waves. "Mrs. Henry," the waitress called softly. Silver hair pulled into a bun, warm eyes. She hadn't noticed me in years, yet somehow she remembered. I smiled faintly. "Too long," I said. She poured coffee without a word. 2 sugars, no cream, just as Henry liked it. I sat by the window, staring out at people who moved fast, unaware of the subtle ruptures life leaves behind. Then my phone buzzed. Emily. "Hey, Mom. I just saw your post about Dad's funeral. I didn't know you went through all that alone. I'm sorry, I guess. Things have been crazy here. Crazy." The word fell flat in my hand, weightless. No warmth, no presence. I didn't reply. I folded a napkin, wrote 3 words in Henry's handwriting style. "Actions have memory." I placed it carefully back in my purse. A reminder for myself, and perhaps one day for them. That evening I returned to Henry's study. His photograph from our 25th anniversary sat on the desk, frozen smiles from a summer-long past. "I did what you would have done," I whispered softly, with grace. Not anger. The lamp cast a soft glow across the family trust folder, now resting in the center of the desk. Tomorrow I would sign it. Tomorrow, The quiet lesson would begin. For now, I let myself sit in the calm, the subtle certainty that even in absence, Henry's presence remained anchored, guiding the steps I would take. Outside, the wind rustled the leaves along the harbor. The world whispered approval, or perhaps it was just the echo of my own heartbeat, slow, deliberate, unbroken. I turned off the lamp and let the shadows fold around me. I wasn't just surviving Henry's absence anymore. I was honoring it. The next morning, sunlight spilled into the study, soft and gray, brushing the edges of Henry's papers. I lingered over the folder, tracing the lines of his handwriting, letting each account, each property detail settle in my mind. There was no rush. The day itself seemed to wait, holding its breath. I made my way to Broad Street again, moving slowly past the cafes and small boutiques. The city felt quieter than usual, the November air thick with a salt and wood scent, a reminder that life goes on, indifferent and steady. I stopped outside the little antique shop Henry loved. He always said that some things carried memory, weight, presence, even if they weren't ours. Inside, the bell above the door jingled, but the shopkeeper didn't notice me. I wandered among the shelves of glass and wood, each item a story I couldn't touch. A clock ticked faintly somewhere in the back, keeping its quiet rhythm, a subtle echo of the funeral day. Back at home, I reviewed my notes once more. I wasn't being cruel, only intentional. The lake cabin would remain untouched, a memory preserved. The Willow Street house would stay theirs eventually, but certain elements, small and deliberate, would remind David and Emily of what it felt like to be absent, to overlook love and care. I paused at the window, watching a small child race past on the sidewalk, laughing as if the world belonged entirely to them. I envied that laughter in a quiet, hollow way. I envied the ease of presence they carried. A knock came at the door. I opened it to find a courier holding a small envelope, marked urgent. Inside, a note in Emily's familiar handwriting. Mom, I know I should have been there. We both got caught up. Can we talk soon? I let the paper rest in my hands. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Words alone wouldn't undo months, years of absence. Actions, I reminded myself, always have memory. David's call came later that afternoon. His voice was polite, distant, measured. Mom, I heard you met with a lawyer. I hope everything's okay. I let the silence stretch between us. Everything's fine, David, I said softly. Henry trusted me to carry this forward. There was a pause on the line, the quiet of realization threading through his tone. Of course, he replied finally, with a faint, hollow weight behind the word. After I hung up, I returned to the study. Henry's photograph stared back at me, arm around me, smiles frozen in a summer light that seemed to stretch forever. I whispered again, softly, almost as a prayer. I'll do this the way you would have wanted, Henry, with calm, with dignity, with justice that doesn't shout. The rain returned in the evening, a soft, persistent tapping against the windows, reminding me that time moves, patient and unyielding. I made myself a cup of tea, sat in Henry's old chair, and allowed the quiet to settle around me. Not grief, not anger, purpose, a careful, deliberate purpose. I wrote in my journal, not for Emily, not for David, not even for anyone but Henry and myself. Tomorrow they will remember. Not through anger, not through shouting, through care, through presence, through the absence they chose. And as the night deepened, I felt a subtle shift in the house. It wasn't peaceful yet, not fully, but it was quiet in a different way. Heavy, yes, certain, like the beginning of a story that had waited too long to be told. Henry's chair creaked softly beneath me. I closed my eyes and imagined his smile, the way he would nod quietly, approving. And for the first time since the funeral, I felt a strange, steady calm settle in my chest. Tomorrow I would move forward. Tomorrow they would understand. Morning came pale and cold, The kind of November morning that doesn't really wake up. It just drifts between gray and silence. I dressed slowly, choosing Henry's favorite scarf, the deep navy one he always said made my eyes look calm. I didn't wear black. I'd already buried enough color. Charleston streets were quiet that morning. The oaks along Church Street swayed softly, the air thick with the faint smell of salt from the harbor. When I reached Mr. Reeves's office, a brick building with ivy crawling up one side, I paused at the door, steadying my breath. He greeted me kindly, as he always had. "Maggie," he said gently, gesturing toward the same old leather chair I'd sat in a dozen times before. "I heard about Henry. I'm so sorry." I nodded, unable to speak for a moment. The sympathy in his voice was warm, but I wasn't here for comfort. I was here for clarity. He reached for the folder I carried and set it on the desk. "Henry was meticulous," he said. "I reviewed most of these documents 2 years ago. But this note at the end." He adjusted his glasses and leaned closer. "All allocations subject to my discretion. That changes everything." I folded my hands in my lap. "It means I decide who receives what, doesn't it?" "Yes," he replied. "It gives you complete control. Complete control." 2 small words, but they carried the weight of every forgotten birthday, every missed call, every empty seat at that funeral. "I'd like to make a few updates," I said. My voice didn't waver. Mr. Reeves nodded. "Of course. What would you like to change?" I looked at the photo on his desk, his own family smiling in some summer sunlight. For a moment I envied them. Then I said quietly, "Everything." We spent hours going through the details. The house on Willow Street, the lake cabin Henry loved, the retirement accounts, the stocks he'd saved for decades. Piece by piece I adjusted the trust. Some assets would remain untouched. Others would find new owners. The children wouldn't be left destitute. I wasn't that kind of mother. But they would feel the distance they'd created. Not in words, but in value. When the meeting ended, Mr. Reeves hesitated. "Are you sure about this, Maggie?" he asked softly. "Sometimes grief—" "This isn't grief," I interrupted. "This is memory, preserved the way it deserves to be." He didn't argue. He just nodded, closed the folder, and said, "I'll have everything ready by Friday." Outside, the sun had broken through the clouds. I walked along Broad Street, past the small cafe where Henry used to stop for coffee after his morning walks. The same waitress still worked there, silver hair pulled into a bun, her smile unchanged. "Maggie," she said when she saw me. "It's been a while," I smiled faintly. "Too long." She poured me coffee without asking, just the way Henry liked it, 2 sugars, no cream. I sat by the window, watching the world pass by. People laughed, hurried, lived. I felt like I was standing still in time. That's when my phone buzzed. A message from Emily. "Hey, Mom, I just saw your post about Dad's funeral. I didn't know you went through all that alone. I'm sorry, I guess. Things have been crazy here." "Crazy," I murmured. The word felt thin, meaningless, no call, no warmth. Just a digital apology written between brunches and beaches. I didn't reply. Not yet. Instead, I took a small napkin from the table and wrote 3 words in neat, careful handwriting. "Actions have memory." I folded it once, slipped it into my purse, and finished my coffee. That evening, as dusk wrapped itself around the neighborhood, I walked into Henry's study again. His photo sat on the desk, the one from our 25th anniversary, his arm around me, both of us smiling like the years ahead would last forever. "I did what you would have done," I whispered. With grace, not anger. The lamp cast a soft light over the folder, now resting in the middle of the desk. Revised Family Trust. Tomorrow, I'd sign it. But tonight, I allowed myself a quiet smile. Not of satisfaction, but of peace. the kind that comes when justice wears dignity's face. Outside, the harbor wind rattled the shutters lightly, as if the world was whispering approval. I turned off the light, leaving only the faint glow from the street outside. The house still felt empty, but it no longer felt powerless. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't just surviving Henry's absence. I was protecting his presence, and they, the ones too busy to say goodbye, were about to remember just how much their father's name meant. The next morning, I woke to a pale, hesitant sunlight spilling through the curtains. The house was still quiet, the kind of quiet that presses against your ears and makes your own heartbeat sound too loud. I walked into the kitchen and poured myself coffee, the aroma faintly comforting. Henry would have been proud of how calm I looked, though inside a storm churned quietly. I spent the morning organizing the notes I'd made the night before. The revised trust, carefully annotated, lay beside me. Every change deliberate, every allocation a reflection of the distance David and Emily had created over the years. Not anger, not punishment, but recognition, a lesson in memory, in presence, in responsibility. When I dialed David's number, he answered on the third ring, his voice casual. "Hey, Mom. Morning. How are you holding up?" I let the silence stretch. "David, I want to talk about your father," I said finally, my voice steady, almost too calm. "Oh, sure. Can we do this later? I have a meeting." I nodded, though he couldn't see me. "Later, that's fine. But I hope you'll listen when the time comes." Really listen, he didn't argue. Just hung up. I turned to Emily's message next. Her words were cheerful, almost too light for the gravity of the situation. "Mom, can't believe Dad's gone. Hope you're okay. Drinks this weekend?" I stared at the screen, breathing slowly, savoring the stillness that she had never respected in life. I typed nothing, not a word. Not yet. Instead, I took out the folder labeled Family Trust and laid it across the kitchen table. I reviewed each section again, imagining their reactions, their faces when they realized how carefully I had balanced Henry's memory with their absence. I smiled faintly, quiet, patient, a knowing smile that carried years of love and disappointment in equal measure. By mid-afternoon, I dressed deliberately, choosing Henry's navy scarf again. I walked slowly to the small post office down on King Street. The air smelled faintly of rain from the night before, and the cobblestones were slick underfoot. I had letters to send. Not just letters, but truths. Each envelope was addressed to one of them, David and Emily. Inside, I placed copies of the revised allocations, accompanied by a simple note. For your memory. Actions have memory. The clerk watched me curiously as I handed over the letters. I smiled faintly. Please make sure these are delivered first thing. She nodded, unaware of the weight behind my words. That evening, I returned home and walked slowly through the living room. Henry's chair was still empty, but somehow it felt like a sentinel now, keeping watch over the house, over me, over the legacy that would no longer be ignored. I poured myself a small glass of wine and sat by the window. Outside, the harbor wind carried the scent of salt and damp earth. The street lamps flickered on, casting shadows that danced along the walls. I raised my glass silently. To memory, I whispered, and to justice carried quietly, with love. And for the first time since the funeral, I felt a subtle shift, a sense that the scales were tipping, not with anger, but with the deliberate patience that Henry had always admired in me. Tomorrow, I would sign the documents. Tomorrow, David and Emily would see not just the absence of their father, but the presence of his life in every decision I made. And I would watch quietly, knowing that sometimes the most profound lessons come wrapped not in words, but in the careful, patient unfolding of truth. Morning came soft and gray, the kind of November day that carries the weight of quiet reflection. I dressed slowly, choosing Henry's favorite navy scarf again. It felt like an anchor around my neck, steadying me, reminding me of the man who had taught me patience, who had taught me the power of subtle presence. The house smelled faintly of brewed coffee and old paper, reminders of the mornings Henry and I had shared, the quiet conversations over toast, the small laughter that had filled the corners of every room. I moved toward his study, each step measured, my fingers brushing over the familiar spines of books, the neat stacks of papers, the handwriting that had guided so many of our days. I sat at the desk and spread the revised family trust across the surface. Each line carried intention. Every allocation reflected the distance David and Emily had created over the years, tempered by the love I still held for them. I could feel Henry's presence in the room, a gentle weight pressing into my shoulder, whispering encouragement, reminding me that justice need not be loud. It could be quiet, deliberate, elegant. Around mid-morning, the post office called. Both letters had been delivered. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I trusted the small, inevitable unfolding of truth to do its work. By noon, I walked down to the cafe Henry had loved, the one on the corner of King Street and Church. The barista recognized me instantly. "Maggie," she said softly, setting a cup of coffee in front of me before I could even ask. "The usual?" I nodded, letting the warmth seep into my hands. I watched the street through the window, noticing small things. The way the leaves clung to the damp sidewalks, the muffled laughter of children across the street, the slow drift of clouds over the harbor. Then my phone buzzed. David had replied. "Mom, I saw the letter. Can we talk?" I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I took a slow sip of coffee, letting the flavor anchor me. "Yes, we will talk," I thought, "and you will understand the cost of absence, the weight of disregard." Emily's message followed shortly after. "Mom, I got it too." "Didn't realize?" I left it unread. I wanted them to feel the quiet first. The anticipation, the reflection that comes when someone realizes they have been absent, when they recognize that their choices have consequences, not delivered in anger, but in steady, thoughtful justice. Returning home, I sat in Henry's chair for a few moments, letting the soft leather conform to me as it had to him. I whispered his name. "Henry, tomorrow they will see." The afternoon light waned, painting long shadows across the floor. I walked through the room slowly, placing small reminders of Henry's life. His reading glasses on the side table, his favorite mug in the kitchen, a folded scarf draped over the arm of the chair. Each gesture silent, intimate, unspoken, yet speaking volumes. When evening fell, I sat by the window with the trust folder beside me. The harbor wind rattled the shutters, carrying a whisper of inevitability. I traced the edges of the paper with a finger and breathed, deep and measured. David and Emily would read, and they would reflect. They would understand the absence they had created, and in that understanding, they would learn. And I would watch quietly, carrying Henry's memory, carrying his dignity, carrying the quiet triumph of love and justice intertwined. And for the first time since the funeral, the house felt full again. Not with voices, not with laughter, but with purpose, because sometimes the most profound lessons come in silence, in patience, and in the gentle unfolding of truth. The morning arrived pale and still, a soft hush settling over Charleston like the world itself was holding its breath. I dressed simply, Henry's scarf loosely draped around my neck. The family trust lay open on the kitchen table, edges perfectly aligned, words deliberate, intentional, weighted with years of absence and disregard. I brewed coffee, the steam curling in the quiet, and watched the harbor fog roll gently over the water. There was a strange calm in knowing today the moment of reckoning would arrive without fanfare, without confrontation, but with undeniable clarity. David arrived first. He stepped onto the porch, hesitated, and I could see the flicker of unease in his eyes. "Mom, I held up a hand, shaking my head gently. "David, read it first, all of it. Every word Henry entrusted me with. Then speak." He swallowed, glanced at the folder, then at me, and retreated to the living room to sit and absorb the contents. I poured 2 cups of coffee and left them on the table, untouched. I waited, listening to the soft tick of the wall clock, the distant caw of gulls over the harbor, the subtle creak of floorboards as he moved through the pages. Hours passed. Not one word from him, just the low murmur of paper sliding under fingertips, the occasional quiet exhale. Emily arrived soon after, a little more hesitant than David. Her eyes darted to the folder, to me, and then back again. "Mom, is this about Dad?" I nodded, calm, composed. "It's about memory, about presence, about absence." She sank into a chair and opened the pages. I watched them, both of them, as realization dawned slowly. The absence they had shown, the missed calls, the skipped birthdays, the empty seats at the funeral, now reflected back at them in meticulous detail. Not anger, not revenge born of malice, but a mirror of consequences. David's hands trembled slightly, Emily's lips pressed thin. Neither spoke. I didn't interrupt. There was no need. By mid-afternoon, they had read every allocation, every note, every carefully considered word Henry had left for me to execute. The house remained silent, heavy with reflection, thick with the weight of understanding. Finally, David looked up. "Mom, we didn't realize. We thought." I let him trail off. There was no scolding, no lecture. The lesson was already spoken in the ledger of choices, in the distribution of inheritance, in the quiet authority I now held. Emily's eyes glistened. I'm sorry, Mom." I smiled softly, a gentle, measured curve of lips. "Emily, David, you were given the chance to be present. You chose differently. Now you understand what absence feels like." They nodded, solemn, still absorbing the quiet power of the day. And in that acknowledgement, I felt Henry's presence in every corner, in the faint sunlight through the blinds, in the soft aroma of coffee, in the subtle warmth lingering in the room. We didn't need words for the rest of the afternoon. We simply moved through the house together, shadows stretching long and slow. And in that movement, I could see them carrying a new weight, awareness, remorse, and the first gentle steps toward accountability. That evening, I sat in Henry's chair, watching the harbor light fade to twilight. David and Emily were quiet, reflective, changed not through anger, but through the patient, deliberate lessons left in the trust. I whispered his name softly. "Henry, we did it. Not with shouting, not with fury, but with love, with memory, with dignity." And for the first time since the funeral, I felt a deep, unshakable peace. Justice had been served not through punishment, but through understanding. Love and remembrance had spoken louder than absence ever could. The night deepened, and I turned off the lights, leaving only the gentle glow from the street lamps outside. I walked to the window one last time, the wind brushing my cheek, carrying a soft promise. Sometimes silence teaches more than words. Sometimes quiet is the most profound form of truth, and sometimes the ones who forgot will never forget again. Thank you for listening to my story. Sometimes silence teaches more than words. Don't forget to subscribe and share your own story in the comments. Maybe your voice will be next on Her Voice.